recent ruling from the RPA Executive Committee is only the latest in a long line of rules violations by the State Executive Committee. Here to share her observations and break it down for you so you know exactly what it means is 1st District Chair Sarah Dunklin. Hey, Sarah.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much for making the trip up here and talking to us about this. This is a really big deal, and I know that a lot of Arkansans, specifically Republicans, are curious about this latest move by the RPA and ultimately like what that means for them. So let's first just briefly walk us back to the state convention. I don't want to spend a lot of time on it because we've covered it at length, but this is the crux of it all. What happened at the state convention and what was accomplished?
The state convention is a body the closest to the people. We as Republicans believe in local control, and this is where the county committee members get an opportunity to become state convention delegates to have their voice heard. Mm-hmm. This is the one chance in every 2-year cycle, just one day out of 2 years, where they really get to come and have their voice heard. And so we saw a lot of good things passed at this convention.
Yeah, a number of those things. And there, as you mentioned, a lot of great things. Specifically, we passed medical freedom in our platform. As far as closing the primaries, that platform change was done really 2 years ago, but we were able to get the rules changed passed regarding closing the primaries. So as you said, a lot of great things happened. Anything else that sticks out to you?
An elected rules committee to prevent situations exactly like this one.
Okay, well, let's talk about situations exactly like this and what that means. So we had the state convention. It was a very long day. A lot of things were passed. Since then, correct me if I'm wrong, I know that contact had been made with leadership at RPA a number of times.
Yes.
Because these things that were passed, do they immediately go into implementation?
It's immediate effect. So it's just like at a meeting, they'll have immediate effect as soon as that motion is made or proposal is made and passed. It's immediate effect.
And so contacted repeatedly
by multiple different county chairmen, the state convention chair, lots of folks contacted, and the state convention chair even went by the headquarters. So to ask when would they be posted online since they were immediate effect.
Okay, and that convention chair was 2nd District Chair Jennifer
Yes.
Lancaster. And I guess you could say now we know why. We know why now everything was being ignored. It's because they wanted to consider this complaint and then make a move on it. Now, as far as I'm concerned, correct me if I'm wrong, we have yet to actually see the complaint. All we've seen or heard about is the advisory opinion.
That's right. No one has seen a complaint. I imagine that's because even bringing a complaint under Article 7 is against the rules. And also the Rules Committee has never issued an advisory opinion before. This is a scenario where they have literally zero authority to do so. The State Executive Committee cannot override the state convention. The State Rules Committee cannot override the state convention. It's in clear violation of Article 1, Section 1B, which says the state convention is the final authority in all party matters, all. What's being attempted is to set a dangerous precedent to override the convention when there is no authority to do so. So in other words, if this were allowed to stand, then every convention from here on out would be subject to the same thing. And so this is not something that we the people can stand for.
Were you surprised when this advisory opinion by Belinda Harris Ritter was released? Did this surprise you at all?
I have to say that yes, it did surprise me. Clearly, I believe that those who wrote this are smart enough to know that they were breaking the rules in doing so. Clearly, Article 1, Section 1B, which says the state convention is the final authority in all party matters, but also in clear violation of Article 7, which it was brought under, which has to do with county committees, district committees, and members, which has nothing to do with delegates. And you know, even let's say it did, have to do with delegates, which it does not have any authority over the state convention. You know, there would have had to be 5 people that filed it. We've not seen the complaint. Additionally, none of the procedure was followed in Article 7. There's a procedure that's laid out. So instead, what was chosen to be done was to issue an advisory opinion, something that's never been done before. Our Rules Committee is not a Supreme Court. That is not the case. And so this is not how there is a procedure by which the Rules Committee should operate in our rules. This was clearly way outside of that and outside the jurisdiction of the State Executive Committee.
I want to talk about that executive committee meeting that happened on Thursday. A number of county committee members, grassroots members showed up there at the headquarters. I don't think that was well received. From my understanding, they were, locked outside, not able to get into the meeting. Walk us through that day. And I know you were there, and because it was a closed session, went into executive session. Those details can't be released, but just give us your overall impression of that day.
Well, there are a few of us on the State Executive Committee that fight hard for the people of the county committees, and we fought hard that day. It was clear to me that there was no concern for the rules. It was brought into that committee because that was a committee where they knew there's a lot of appointments on that committee. It's just a committee where they knew they had the votes. And so they were going to take the illegal action in the committee, and that's what they were going to do. So it had nothing to do with following proper procedure or any of the rest of it.
Let's talk briefly about Robert's Rules of Order and how they play into our RPA rules when the RPA rules are silent, and specifically, again, because they're wanting to discredit the actions taken at the state convention.
Right, and Jenny, there's no options left for them, right? They can, the options are to discredit, essentially, they're in damage control mode. The options are simply to, discredit the people of the county committees who came and voted as state convention delegates, and that's what's going on here. And so, and project what they're doing onto us. And so I find it sad. I think it's really, really sad that this is what the Republican Party of Arkansas has come to.
I think a lot of people would agree with you. Let's talk briefly about Chairman Joseph Wood. I think that, again, this is nothing personal. This is talking about his position as chair and how he handles the body, how he leads meetings. Talk to us about, have you seen a pattern from this chairman as well as this executive body over the past year or so? The first thing that comes to mind, I believe, was the winter meeting. That was in complete disarray. I don't think that if you were to ask people, we haven't seen a meeting like that in a very long time. Points of order completely ignored, disregarding other, motions and that sort of thing. Talk to us about the pattern and what you've seen over the past year with this party leadership and then county committee members.
We've just seen a strong arm control, and that was kind of the message, right, going into it, and we should have believed it at the time because it's a strong arming control. I do think too that it can be difficult unless you're used to leading meetings of hundreds of people to go in and immediately do that and have it all right. So anyway, we've seen some of that. I definitely think it's been a consistent thing. It's definitely even me, it's deeply concerning. I have to say that I had no idea, even me, that it could be this bad.
Yeah. The thing that stuck out to me about this advisory opinion that and again, not to get into the weeds of it, but they just adopted it, or I mean, it's not like any action was necessarily taken, but the fact that they agree with this advisory opinion and they're moving forward with it, it flies in the face of things that have happened in previous state conventions, does it not?
It does, and actually, even the Rules Committee chair herself was in agreement in the 22 convention to hear all timely proposals. And the reason for that is that timely submitted proposals must be heard. They cannot be not reported. Actually, Robert's rules specifically states you cannot not report them. So you can't just omit them. And so she was in favor of that. In fact, at the time, She was even in favor of hearing all proposals from the floor, whether timely submitted or not, which is exactly what had been done in every previous convention up until 22. All proposals were allowed from the floor. So actually 22 would be the only convention, and we did hear the timely submitted closed primary platform submission at that convention that was allowed to be heard. It was timely submitted, it was not recommended, and it was allowed to be heard anyway correctly. And then, but there was also, not everyone knew, but there was also a rules change that would have actually closed our primaries that was going to be heard, and in an effort to block that rules change, all of a sudden they say, oh, you can't bring anything from the floor. And so in order, the parliamentarian at the time would not agree to that. And so and the current rules chairman, who was the platform chairman in the 22 convention, she actually agreed with parliamentarian on both of those points, that you could bring all timely submitted proposals, and that you could bring items from the floor. So to see this about face in the name of, hey, they passed something we don't like, you know, that's disappointing.
Our viewers will remember the state committee meeting back in May. That was another hard-fought battle, I believe, between the establishment and the grassroots members. The establishment tried to get something passed that would change the vote at the state convention preemptively.
Yes.
From the 2/3. That failed at the state committee meeting, which was pretty incredible and surprising to see, I think. But moving into the state convention, correct me if I'm wrong, but the things that were passed as a majority passed greater than with the 2/3 majority. Is that correct?
Yes, all rules and platform changes did pass with greater than a 2/3, and so did the flexible agenda. And some of them passed unanimously, and some of them would just be one nay. You know, so it's interesting to see how things have kind of come around. That what they were worried about actually never happened. We all passed handedly. So
and then also talk to us about notice.
Well, on the notice, there's no requirement for all proposals to be sent out. The only ones that are required to be sent out are actually the approved ones.
Right.
The approved ones. The not reported and the not recommended do not have to be sent out. And additionally, you can bring items from the floor. Any amendment is allowed from the floor. That's just a fact. So.
Well, and it also gives the impression, and I watched the statement from Chairman Wood that he gave to local news outlets. And of course, we've asked him numerous times to come on Conduit. We'd love to hear his perspective. He continues to decline. But it's almost as if their stance now is this rules and platform committees, our executive body, we're the gatekeepers. We're the gatekeepers. And unless we say this may move forward, it doesn't move forward.
That's correct. And that's not how the party works. You know, that's not the structure of the Republican Party of Arkansas. It's clearly laid out in the rules what that structure is, and they're operating outside of that structure. So everybody should be clear on that. I would say too, in 22, the RNC parliamentarian was let go in order to get it done where you could not hear anything from the floor. So, you know, we don't want as Republicans to act like, I don't know if y'all remember 22 was Pulaski County didn't get seated and those proposals were not allowed. We don't want to act like that in the Republican Party. So therefore, that is why the convention chose to amend the program to hear them and also adopted a flexible agenda, because they have to be reported by Robert's rules.
Do you, and I completely agree, it's hard to believe that the party, especially those who have been involved in the party for so long, and they're principled or so to believe, and they know the rules, that they would allow this to stand. Are you surprised by that?
Or author it, or
do you see any legislators or any elected officials coming forward? If I were elected official, I would not want to be lumped into this.
Right.
With this type of behavior, I would not want that at all. Do you see any legislators or any other elected officials coming forward?
I have not, but that doesn't mean there haven't been, but I have personally have not.
Chairman Joseph Wood sent out a number of emails over the weekend. One of those was to county chairs. The other was to members of the General Assembly. And I have that email, and I just want to briefly mention a few things that he stated, that Chairman Wood stated. He said, I wanted to make sure you all have seen a statement from the Republican Party. That was the email that was sent out immediately following the Executive Committee meeting and their decision. And he said, as I made it clear earlier this year, I reject the attempts to silence the voice of the people's duly elected representatives and senators on our state committee. We will continue to follow the RPA rules and apply them equally to everyone. You are all, and he's speaking to the legislators, you are all voting members of the RPA State Committee. That has not changed. Several things that stuck out to me was, we're going to continue to follow the RPA rules and apply them equally. That seems very rich to say. But then also mentioning that they're all voting members. And then he also included updated copies of the rules and platform to the email. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, the rules and platform that were adopted at convention are those that took immediate effect, and those are the correct rules and platform. So that's not in question. And I understand that they're trying to do this, but they are completely outside the rules, and everyone in the party needs to understand that the links that they'll go to. And I will even say this, that when we start talking about the things that were listed in this quote unquote advisory opinion, it even calls into question our presidential electors. It calls into question our Republican nominees. When we start talking about order of business, that affects the nominees. When we start talking about order of business and quorum, that affects our presidential electors. And make no mistake, the convention had every right to do what it did. And that is false. The things that were said and the conclusions that were drawn were incorrect conclusions, but people should never be confused about whether or not our electors and our nominees are valid. And then, there's a lot of far leftists out there. We wouldn't want to open that up to any question.
Yeah. And John, I was talking to Brenda this morning, and I was like, they did it again. They made us agree with John Brummett. Our Republicans do. And John Brummett, in his opinion, in his op-ed today, he wrote about just political happenings on the Democrat and Republican side. And one thing that he did say, he said a small band of literal party bosses got together in a closed meeting Thursday and presumed to void everything the duly elected convention delegates had done democratically from the convention floor. And then he said, I guess the state committee members enjoyed my participation in their primaries, voting for a Beckett here and a Beckett there. And then also Senator Greg Leding, the day that this news broke last week, the irony is not lost on Greg. He said on Twitter, and he retweeted, it was either Wickline or Brummett, I'm not sure. But he said, so after all the Republicans voted, a select group of designees can just undo those votes. And, you want to cry because it's just so unbelievable. And the thought to myself was, I better not hear one of these Republicans talk about the DNC presumed presidential nominee and how they just installed Harris,
right,
without, that they discounted millions of votes. What would you say to that?
I would say absolutely. They look like Democrats. And I would add that, Democrats call Trump a threat to democracy. And this is this is basically what they're saying to county committee members. You're a threat to our,
power structure.
Yes, exactly.
Power structure. I know that there are a number of county committee members and county chairs who know that this was done correctly, and they're just ready to move forward, right, with their business.
That's right.
But what would you recommend? How do you see this playing out? What should they do?
Well, I would say always stand strong. So the reaction, this strong of a reaction, was for a reason. They were essentially had no other choice but to try to discredit the decisions that were made. And it's a very weak position, weak at best.
Yeah.
And it's really sad that they would call any of the convention into question, let alone just pick and choose the certain parts that they didn't like.
Yeah.
So, which by the way, their arguments don't make sense when you look at it from that perspective.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
mhm.
You can't, argue that there wasn't a quorum, but then when the presidential
Yeah.
electors were chosen, that was at the very end, at
Yes,
which they said there was not a quorum.
right. So it's interesting. Clearly the document was chock full of errors that are able to be disproved, but why even bring
Right.
that up? Why even raise those issues? It's
Yeah,
interesting.
it's outside of their jurisdiction for
Mhm.
sure. What else do you want people to know about this?
Well, I just think that it's sad that they would put, even when we're talking about people's lives, medical freedom,
Yeah.
economic freedom, we're talking about closing our primaries, electing a rules committee. All of these things are things that the people want, and people's lives are at stake. And they could even be putting,
Yeah.
their own self-interest above our presidential electors. And these are really egregious things. These are irresponsible things. And then the attitude towards the county committee members, there were county chairmen out there with us. When the meeting was on Thursday, there were county chairmen outside. There were elected county officers, and they just got treated very, just disgracefully.
Yeah. And that's hard to see.
It is.
Before I let you go, as you're talking about this, you and I have spoken about this before, just in conversation. This isn't just unique to Arkansas. If you think about before the RNC, what some of the delegates was it Missouri, I believe, what they
Missouri,
went through, some other states,
some other states.
there are some major battles going on between establishment and grassroots,
There
America
are.
First Patriots.
There are, and the National Convention spoke and cited in favor of the grassroots in all the cases that I know about. In certain cases that had to be re-brought up, re-argued, that type of thing to get the result we wanted, but in every case, they sided with the grassroots. This is going on across the country, and I would say that presidential electors are becoming more and more important. And so it's something to watch, and we just keep an eye on that.
Sarah, what I want people to just completely and fully understand is, again, this executive body within the RPA has no authority to do this. They're completely overriding the body, which delegates the authority.
That's right. The final authority in all party matters is the biennial state convention. That's just a fact. There's no changing that. It's almost laughable what they've done, except for the fact that it's so serious.
Yeah, and as we talked about, it's completely outside of, and just to hammer this home, this was sent out in the statement, and then also to the emails to the county committee chairs as well as the General Assembly. The party says we will continue to follow the RPA rules and apply them equally to everyone. This alleged process that they're moving forward with is completely outside of the RPA rules and completely outside of Robert's Rules of Order.
That's correct. And as reported, the vote was 18-5. So basically they're saying that 23 people could come in and change the will of the highest body in the Republican Party of Arkansas, which is the state convention, which had over 600 in attendance.
I'm going to ask you something that I think, may be controversial, but if you'll remember, at the meeting where we elected party chairman Joseph Wood, then to become the party chair, Jennifer Lancaster spoke on your behalf. And she read a quote from John Adams. Do you remember that?
Yes.
And that's something that we've heard about a lot since that meeting.
Yeah, we did.
And she spoke about tyranny
Mhm.
and how we need to be on watch
Yes.
and to hold people accountable, especially our elected officials. And that's what it was.
Mhm.
But a lot of people took great offense to it,
Mhm.
mainly elected officials, or those within.
Sadly, she ended up being right.
Well, and that was my question. Do you see that now coming to fruition?
Yes. Unfortunately, for every member of this party, unfortunately.
Sarah, is there anything else? We've covered a lot, and I would so appreciate you coming in. Is there anything else you would want to talk about that we haven't covered, or you just want our viewers to know?
Yes, I would say stand up, speak up. Now's the time. Please contact those in the party at all levels to let them know how you feel about
Yeah.
this issue. It's so important.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Sarah, and hope to have you back in again soon.
Thanks, Jen.